Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to the first act up of the fall 2021 semester. My name is Ellen Skilton, and I'm the faculty director of the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Mentoring. And I am thrilled to have such wonderful panelists here tonight to help us dig into what good trouble is and how we might be able to get into more of it. For those of you who are not participants in the Living Our Values experience, the Love Pilot, this program is an on-campus program at Arcadia University for undergraduate and graduate students, faculty and staff who come together to learn how to take anti-racist action and to do the personal, interpersonal, and community work that we need to do to try to become better anti-racists. So I am very excited to turn things over to our two moderators today, and then we'll be hearing from the wonderful panelists who will be digging into good trouble with us tonight. So I'm going to turn things over to Oliver Moe and Monica Daye, two of our own here on campus, to first introduce themselves and then invite us into this conversation. I'm going to be monitoring the chat and the Q&A. So our hope is that we're going to have lots of time for conversation as we move through this evening. And so please include any and all of your questions. And if you get new ideas for how you would define good trouble, we have a great start on the Jamboard, but keep adding to it. So Oliver and Monica, take things away.
Sure. Appreciate you, Ellen. Once again, thank you all for being here, being actively present in this work. My name is Oliver Moe. I'm right now the coordinator of student athlete success and leadership here at Arcadia University. So I got here in around the middle of June. So still kind of new in my experiences here, but really excited to have some great discussions here alongside my co-facilitator or co-moderator rather, Monica Daye. But yeah, so that's a bit about my role. I'll pass it over to Monica there.
Hey, thanks, Oliver, and welcome everybody. I'm really excited to be here tonight. I am Monica Daye. I am a former, I have to say I'm an alum of Arcadia, so I'm a former master's student at Arcadia and then a current adjunct faculty and working as administrative liaison in the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Mentoring. So it seems I can't get enough of this place. And my pronouns are she and her. And without further ado, I'm really excited to just have this panel here. So I think the less you hear from us and the more you hear from them, the better. So I want to just welcome you all first. We have such a great combination tonight of current student and alumni and our state representative and our one of our newest assistant director for our civic and global engagement. So I feel like this is going to be a really rich conversation. So I want to just invite each of you to give us a little introduction to yourselves, your name, pronouns, how you sit here in this place, you know, your relationship to good trouble, and let's start there. And I think I might bounce it to you first, Representative Nelson, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to just the university for all that you guys are doing in our communities. I am Napoleon Nelson. I am the state rep representing Cheltenham, Jenkintown, and Springfield. To me, it is the 154th legislative district. It is also just home. And so it is an absolute pleasure to be here and to welcome you all to my home, and thank you for having me here with you all. My place in this is kind of weird, right? So I'm still learning how to get into and what good trouble is. I'm also 42 at this point, so I'm new to the State House. I'm getting more, you know, tentacles in my hands that I can, you know, really kind of use to kind of wield good trouble. But at the same time, I know that there are some amazing young people coming behind me who are really going to be the fire that are going to light this world and I'm looking forward to them as well. And so I'm both kind of new at this. I am to some degree in my prime and really able to inflict a little bit of trouble. And at the same time, I'm looking for the next person to take the torch. And so I'm also just a mentor in that way. So it's an odd space for me to sit in, but I'm going to learn, and you guys are going to help me do that and do that well.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being here. And speaking of fire, I think I'm going to go over to Aliyah Abraham, if you'd be willing to introduce yourself next.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Aliyah Abraham. I'm an Arcadia grad. I graduated in 2017. I was a business admin major with a Pan-African Studies minor. And my relationship to Good Trouble, I guess that kind of earmarks my time at Arcadia. Good Trouble allowed me to create a lot of programming, namely founded the Black Alumni Association. I also started the task force that led to the successful creation of the Nights for Nutrition Food Pantry. And I also spearheaded the Day of Silence that I guess spurred the things that we have now, including the Love Project pilot. So I am, I guess, no stranger to Good Trouble. And thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Can't wait to hear more. And I'm going to come to our current student now, Tessa Rice. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Tessa. I go by she, her pronouns. I am a third year International Business and Culture student. I'm also Western captain of our equestrian team and do photography outside of school. And I hope to one day get into digital media as a career. I would say I sit in this space as a Black woman and also student at Arcadia who finds herself as the only Black woman a lot of times in these spaces. And I know a lot of other students at the school can resonate with that. So I hope to provide some insight on that. And I've always had a hard time with Good Trouble because I find myself to be very uncomfortable having these conversations and have an even harder time initiating these conversations, especially in professional and academic environments. And so I hope to change that. I hope to get better at that. And I hope to maybe make a difference at Arcadia.
Thank you so much. So excited to have you. And last but not at all least, I want to invite Jayzy Omollo. I didn't ask how to pronounce your last name before. Shoot. Can you say it for me so I can say it right?
Sure. It's Jayzy Omollo.
Jayzy Omollo. Okay. I apologize for not asking sooner. So happy you're here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. No problem. So my name again is Jayzy Omollo. I go by the pronouns she, her, and hers. I am the new assistant director at the Civic and Global Engagement Division, specifically working as a liaison between the community and Arcadia, surrounding community. Why am I sitting here? I'm sitting here because Good Trouble is my profession. I am a community organizer in and outside of the work that I do at Arcadia towards racial justice. Racial justice is one of my passions. In addition to that, Good Trouble is something that John Lewis was known for. And I had the honor of being recruited by the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation to be a legislative intern for Congressman John Lewis. And I was able to learn from him, kind of observing what he did on Capitol Hill and apply all of what I've learned to my own profession and my own passions as a Black woman who is very for Good Trouble, is doing Good Trouble out here, especially in our state. So I'm honored to be a part of this.
Perfect. Thank you, Jayzy, and thank you to all the panelists for introducing yourselves. What came up a couple of times, starting from Representative Nelson, was just the idea of good trouble and young people and the younger generation who are kind of emerging into this world, emerging into the society, and kind of making that initial change. And that was something that John Lewis himself also spearheaded. So I'd be interested to hear from your perspectives, maybe Aaliyah, Jaisy, and Tessa, but if you'd like to chime in, what role do you think or do you feel that young people should have in really engaging in or with good trouble?
I can start. I think it's so cliche to say that the youth, we are the future, but in reality, that's the truth. I think we kind of underestimate the value of that phrase. The youth are the people who will be building this nation to be what they feel it should have been a long time ago. And so I think that, we really need to put value on that phrase. I think that the youth we all have been the renaissance of, new ideas that we bring into like society currently. And we've been the face of social justice in different centuries, right? So even when we're thinking of John Lewis led his people. John Lewis walked alongside of Martin Luther King as a young person, right? But I definitely see versions of that in our current society, in our generation, with the Black Lives Matter movement. But yeah, I think that we should put value on, us as the youth being the future of our world.
If I can kind of follow up from that, like I think the youth are a undervalued stakeholder in change. And as Jaisy said, the youth have been the face of several movements with Vietnam and the anti-war, SNCC, and the civil rights movement. These were people in their young adulthood, kind of parallel to when you're in college age and things like that, in their prime, leading these forefront and actually challenging the status quo. So I think the youth have always been on the front lines. So I think that at times when people say that the youth have no place, I think we are the place, because we're trying to create the change that we want to when we get out into the quote unquote real world, that things are better for us because we are the stakeholders. So if you're looking for equality and socioeconomics, and you're looking for to mitigate environmental racism, if you look, those topics are being led by the youth, because once we get out into the real world, we're trying to change things that the generation behind us, we believe, have fumbled. So I think the youth are the ones, the most powerful beings in the movements for social justice.
Yeah, I agree with what both of my fellow panelists have said, and they worded it really good. But just to add on to that, I know, like, I talk about a lot of like current social issues with my family, with my mom in particular. And she always talks about how my generation is so much more progressive. She comes from a very traditional generation where, you kind of stick to the status quo and you don't really fight it. And so I'm very proud that our generation is considered to be so progressive and so outspoken on things we're passionate about. And I think the youth brings on real change.
I think I can actually, so I appreciate all your perspectives with that, and maybe directing this to Representative Nelson and Aaliyah potentially, but, say you are a young person and you all kind of mentioned how those are a critical, of critical importance with these social movements. Say you are a young person and want to get involved in anti-racism. I want to make a difference and I want to engage in these good causes. What now? Where could you go from there? What are some outlets for that? And how could or how should somebody go about that? So Representative Nelson, would you mind maybe taking that one on?
Sure. I think the first thing I would tell young people is to find other young people who are like-minded. Us old heads, there is power in numbers, and there's power in movements by youth that you're asking me, what next and how do I could give you legislation. I could talk to you about, some other people who could be mentors and people who could help, you think about the process and yada, yada, yada. Or you can, take you and find 5 friends and find, each of them find 5 more friends. And all of a sudden, if it's me having a conversation with you, that's one thing. If I'm having a conversation with 25 activists who say we would like to do so-and-so, that's another. If those 25 people say, you know what, let's all go outside and stand on a corner and talk about blank and invite all your friends and connect however in the world you all connect these days, and all of a sudden, something that started with just a thought, started with this burn inside, a concept that led to passion. That passion leads to connectivity, and now you're holding up traffic, and you're clearly making your voices heard. You're clearly making your presence felt. You didn't need me for that. You didn't need my explanation of legislative process. You didn't need to sit down and have a meeting with a blank person of power to really make your voices heard and have your impact felt on campus, in the community, in society. To some degree, don't wait. The flip side is, on the other side of that is, once you've done that, now we'd be very happy to talk with you, because going from having a voice, raising a voice, and then to creating sustained change does oftentimes require that those within positions of power begin to move. What I generally think is the best way to do that is continue to hold us accountable. Continue to hold us accountable. It doesn't mean that you walk with us. It doesn't mean that you go from being an activist to an executive, or an activist to somebody kind of sitting on boards or something. It means that you continue to act, and we will continue to modify our behaviors in response. So that would always be my first goal, is to say, if you're a young person looking to be really active, to get into trouble, find other like-minded young people, and then you begin to raise hell.
So you've both, a few of you have mentioned, something about getting out into the real world, or how to make that transition. And I'm thinking about, that transition that young people make, right, from like college or, high school or whatever, into jobs and whatnot, and how to balance good trouble with what might the consequences be of that, right? And worrying about, will that make me a target in some way, or will that hinder my job prospects, like those types of things. And I'm wondering if, I'm especially thinking, Aaliyah, you crossed that bridge not too long ago, and Jaisy, you as well. So I'm just thinking, what advice might you give young people who, have to go out and make a living, in the world is what it is, and they want to make good trouble, and how does it not blow back on them?
I think if you're authentic in the good trouble, that as people see that your intent is genuine, I think it kind of isolates you. So for me, I worked in a very conservative space right out of college. So I worked for the Department of Navy, but I brought the same message of diversity and inclusion to that space, and it was well received. So it was me challenging, all intents and purposes. I'm in a boardroom full of white older males, and, raising the concerns that I'm looking around and I don't see myself. And I think when you're authentic in wanting to cause the good trouble that you have to risk something to lose something. Because if you're unwilling to lose something, then it's just performative. So it's no longer that you're really trying to do the work. So could it have been a career non-starter? Absolutely. But not only was the message well received, all the things that I, wanted to bring to the forefront were implemented because it was something that I was passionate about, but I was also prepared. So I wasn't just talking. I went out and did the research. I went out and showed the numbers, and I went out and showed the statistics. And so I think that's what a lot of people have to keep in mind. You can be passionate about it, but you have to show that you studied what you're talking about at the same point, because a good talk is good, but that's only going to get you so far into the room. So you want to make sure that you have, the basis and the foundation for which your argument is rooted in, because there's going to be naysayers and detractors. So if you're in, a space or an environment in a corporation that has typically never had that good trouble, but you're coming in and saying, but I've looked at it and I can show how this is going to help the bottom line, help the morale of the employees, then you're making it harder for them to say no. But if you're just talking and they push back and you don't have a pivot, then it just kind of all falls apart. But if you do your due diligence and your research, I think you have you're more often going to get a success versus a failure if you do that due diligence for that.
Thanks, Aaliyah. For me, in my journey, I realized that there's a role for everyone in justice work and doing justice in whatever work that you do. And so I struggled a lot with trying to figure out what role I wanted to play in this justice world, particularly around racial justice. What good trouble could I contribute to? And a lot of those struggles that I had came from my own internal growth that I needed to do with racial injustice. What did I see myself? What did I see my self-worth as? And how could I support other people in my position as Black and brown women going into the world and being a professional in the world, being young? How could I contribute to change and be effective? And so I got into the world of, I tried different things. I tried, going into the field where I was doing, I was protesting, I was doing, I was using my anger around these, about these issues in the field, right? Doing the protesting, almost getting arrested, civil disobedience. I tried to do the political side of things, like contributing to policy change. But I really found my strength and my ability to keep going in being with the people who are learning, who are developing, who are closest to the pain, and they're willing to do something for their community. That's where I found my passion. I found my passion in walking alongside of those people and helping them be a resource to their community as I can be. So I hope that kind of answers the question.
No, it definitely didn't. Thank you for that, Jaisy. And I think so. What I heard a bunch of you all, Aaliyah and Jaisy, mention, with one, being authentic when you approach this work. I think that's definitely important. And then Jaisy, you mentioning, that this work is meant for everybody and everybody has a role in and of itself. But potentially, could maybe speak to the idea of, how can you approach this work in a way that's not performative and in a way that's actually substantive? And I think you see a rise of that potentially with social media as well. So whoever would like to maybe comment a little bit on that, the distinction between performative work and substantive work. I think that'll be really helpful to all the listeners.
Aaliyah, you want to go first?
Oh, yeah, I'll take it. I think I touched on it earlier by saying you have to be willing to lose something, even if you don't gain what you're trying to change. For me, I did a lot of my quote unquote activism at Arcadia on my way out the door. And I was trying to change a lot of things that would never help me or affect me. So there was things that were going to change, but after I left campus, but it didn't matter to me if it was something that I wasn't going to benefit from. That's the word I'm looking for. Like if you're fighting at the risk of losing something, even if you don't benefit for them changes you're trying to see, because that's when you know that it's not performative because you gain nothing from it. And you're just trying to change it for those around you, for the greater good of those that surround you. So for me, I've always used the barometer of, does the cost outweigh, does the benefit outweigh the cost? And if what I'm trying to do is going to help more people, then it's going to really hurt me. If I lose something, then I'm okay with it at the end of the day. And I think a lot of people want to be activists until it gets uncomfortable, and then they'll back up and they won't do it. They'll do it for like, comments, social media clout. But the moment that they're at the point of losing something, then you'll notice they'll backtrack. Or sometimes a lot of people perform so they can kind of say they checked the box, and it doesn't mean it. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, 100%. I think one thing that I've realized, especially as an organizer, is we're not going to end these issues. These issues are so embedded into our systems that it's very unlikely for us to say like, hey, I'm going to end racism, right? I'm going to end, police brutality in America. It's just not possible as individuals, because it's so embedded in our systems and our culture that it just won't work. But, to answer your question, when you're going into the work, look towards measurable things, like measurable wins that you can say like, hey, this is a step towards those issues that may not be possible to like end or to fix, but like going into a work or going into like a project or like a passion, just saying like, I want to do these specific things in order for like myself or the people around me to have a better experience, to like destructing these systems are not about ending the issue. It's more so about having measurable wins in order to like, lean towards making something better. So in regards to, what Aliyah said, it doesn't make sense for me, or like, I don't find it beneficial to go on social media and say like, I want to end, end racism. I want to do this, that, and the third. Instead, I want to go to, for example, the people who are, my Arcadia community, the people who are passionate, who are like-minded, like Representative Nelson said, I want to go to like-minded people and say like, hey, these are the systems that are affecting our Arcadia community. What can we do to fix, measurable issues, measurable things that we see, on a day-to-day basis, in order to move towards, ending the larger issue.
I'll also jump in real quick. First, can you hear me a little bit better? Okay. So I think performative versus like really truly effective in moving things forward, really, it just has to do with, I guess, how effective you are. Some folks may say something on Twitter, the outrage of, I want to do so-and-so, as Jaisy just mentioned. it may not go anywhere, but part of what you're doing, and I want to make sure you all appreciate this, is at least you're finding your voice and you're beginning to tap into what your true north is, right? So it's hard to really start moving in substantive ways, having impact, if you've never gone through the first process of saying, I'm mad as hell and I just can't take it anymore, and you say something, right? So there is real benefit in just finding your voice and just being able to begin to express your outrage. No, it may not immediately lead to something, but what it's going to lead to is you beginning to tap into where your direction may be. And folks will recognize, and hopefully you'll continue to hone that and get better at it, so that when it is time to either step into the limelight or not into the limelight, but into the background and really start trying to move pieces, you'll have a little bit of practice. You'll be a little bit more familiar with what you want to do, and theoretically, a friend, a colleague, somebody who yelled the same thing when you did will be right there to help you, right? So the difference between, something that seems performative and something that really brings impact, oftentimes, is understanding your sphere of influence and your sphere of control. Because there can be people who really have significant power, who can do really jacked up stuff in our world, not because they're really passionate about it, but because they have an awful lot of control. Similarly, there can be folks who have very little control, who are really passionate, and so they have just great influence, and they're really able to use your voice well. So don't necessarily shy away from something that you feel is just performative, because that's really part of the building blocks of you as an activist. And we'll kind of get into why that's so important with Good Trouble, I believe, a little bit later.
Can I kind of jump back in really quick? I think last year was a great example of performative social justice versus authentic, where everyone, once George Floyd was murdered, jumped on this bandwagon of doing quote unquote the work because it was the trend to do. But a year later, if you go back to a large quantity of those people, they're not doing the same work. They fell off that bandwagon and it's not as intense. Everyone talked about, being an ally, but how many people after that continue to do the work? So it's performative when you're doing it when everybody else is doing it and it's comfortable to do it, but it's authentic when you're doing the work even when it's uncomfortable. And I think that highlights a good example of performative versus trendy and what's was stylish to do at the time.
Yeah, it's a great answer, all of them. I wanted to pull Tessa in from a student perspective on this, because I guess a couple of things. You were started out saying you're often the only Black woman in your environment, and so how does that impact what Good Trouble feels like to you getting into it, and also how does it trickle down to you, right? How do you recognize from your standpoint that's performative, that's substantive, I can feel that, I can't feel that, right?
Definitely in terms of performative versus not performative, like Aaliyah was saying, you can say one thing on social media, you can be very active politically on social media, but if you're not upholding those same beliefs in person, it becomes a matter of being performative, especially since you have to be very willing to make people uncomfortable and sacrifice friendships, relationships, all of that stuff. In a classroom, being the only Black woman at times, it's a million times harder to create Good Trouble, mostly because you don't know how it's going to be received, especially when a lot of my peers tend to be white males in business school. And so it's socially, it can be kind of weird because like I said, you don't know how it's going to be received. And also, I don't know, it's it's about the support of your fellow students, especially white students, to listen. So yeah.
And Tessa, I appreciate that answer. And we can maybe even possibly just, but building on that, I think if you're in college, you're there for only a few years, and that might, that definitely means something. And obviously there is like a longer life ahead of everybody that goes to college. But I think maybe directing this to you, and then if anybody else wants to chime in afterwards. But Leah mentioned this, the idea of when a major social moment happens, it's a moment. So the killing of George Floyd, the killing of Breonna Taylor, several unarmed Black men and women and Black bodies have been killed. That's a moment. How can we maybe kind of transfer that into something that becomes a movement, something that's more sustainable and something that has progress rather than just kind of a blip and then a year later that sort of thing is gone? So maybe Tessa, would you mind speaking to your experience as again, like a student here at Arcadia for a few years and then moving into that alumni kind of sphere as well? But would you mind maybe commenting on that?
Yeah, I think it's about being so moved by those occurrences like the killing of George Floyd, and all of those situations in general, and being moved enough to incorporate activism in your everyday life, even when it's inconvenient, especially as a student. You're dealing with a lot, you have a lot on your plate, but it's important to still recognize all of these things because Black and brown students have to deal with it every day. And they think about race every single day. They feel race every single day. And so I think it's very easy for white students to, they feel something towards those types of things, but it can be hard for them to like maintain that. And so, yeah, I think it's just about like having the conversations and like actually making like changing your actions, like going from one thing to the next and like actually showing a difference in your behavior.
I wanted to just, before we go on, to just remind everyone that's watching that we are going to have Q&A. So if you have questions as you go along, we're going to have about a good 30 minutes or so after that we're done. So I just wanted to get you to start thinking about that as you're hearing these answers. And I was wondering, as we start to kind of lead up to that, I think one of the things that would be great to hear, you each have gotten into some good trouble, or maybe you're thinking about it. I'd love to hear some specifics of, something that you saw or a specific thing that you did or a moment. I guess, like, where does that spark of good trouble like come from? How have you grabbed it, and how do you ride it? I think people might really appreciate hearing like some real specific experiences, because they might be trying to figure out. I love what you said, Napoleon, that like, I'm mad as hell, right? And I don't know what to do about it, but like, that's such a frustrating place. And then it's like, how do you move from that into action? So I think it would be great to hear from some of you about how that's gone for you.
I can start. I know, like I was saying earlier, I don't always have the easiest time like creating good trouble, but I take the people that I surround myself with very seriously. I tend to be very selective with who my friends are, my group. And I have ended friendships and romantic relationships over differences. And I think that is one way that I've found it to be most impactful for me to create good trouble, because yeah, I think who you surround yourself with is important, and it's really hard to lose friends and people that you're really deeply close with because of differences. I don't even want to say differences, but just because of ignorance and racism. And so yeah, I think that's probably my most uncomfortable moment, and having to recognize and set that boundary for myself of like what I will tolerate in a friendship, what I will tolerate in a relationship. And that has changed over the years. I was a lot more accepting, probably like in high school and stuff like that. And then as I got into college, and you become more educated and your circle also becomes smaller, it becomes more important that the people around me support me and genuinely care about the issues that I care about. And so, yeah, that's my version of good trouble.
Thank you, Tessa. And I'm going to also just pull in here. I know that Tessa's part of one of our working groups, and Oliver co-facilitates the working groups. And this is something that each of our working groups, and especially for those who aren't familiar with the LOVE program, we have 6 different working groups that are looking at specific areas, right? Education and athletics and healthcare, right? So I think also just getting to that specific place for them as well would be a great piece for you to add into your answer.
Like in terms of like how I incorporate the working group in.
Oh, no, sorry, Tessa, your answer was perfect. I was letting the other, because I know you're in Love Pilot, so you know about this, but I know that for Aaliyah and Jaisy and Napoleon, I wanted them to just have that structure in mind for their answers.
Sure. So aside from being the assistant, one of the assistants here at Arcadia, well, at our Civic and Global Engagement Division, I am a community organizer, like I said. Prior to joining the Arcadia community, I worked for an organization called Power Interfaith, a large organization, community organizing, social justice organization here in Pennsylvania. A couple of months back, we had 3 Philadelphia organizers. I was one of them. We're trying to come up with ideas to respond to the racial injustice centered around our underfunded schools in Pennsylvania. So a lot of people don't realize how extremely underfunded our Black and Brown schools are in the state of Pennsylvania compared to our predominantly white schools, public schools. And so we did a series of things throughout, I guess, the past 3 years. But, we were trying to figure out what we can do during the pandemic to really respond to this issue and, hold our representatives accountable to support the folks who are affected by, our underfunded public schools. And so 3 of us used the relationships that we had. We built new relationships. We talked to people who, who have children. We talked to parents. We talked to teachers, principals, superintendents, and really brought all those relationships together to like hold we called it a pilgrimage. And it was, I think it was like a 4-mile walk from the Philadelphia side of City Avenue to the Montgomery side of City Avenue, to show the difference between, what's going on in Philly. Look at the value, look at how the school looks physically versus how the school looks in Montgomery County. And so we took, I think it was 500 people on the pilgrimage. We talked to some representatives who are in support of our efforts. Some of them came. Senator Haywood was there, and City Councilwoman Helen Gim. And so they supported us, and we said, you know, this is what we're standing for. This is what we're standing, you know, this is a racial injustice in our community. And although we didn't, you know, get any legislative change, it was something that, you know, the news saw, because we were right by 6 ABC on City Avenue. So, you know, it got attention from all these news media organizations. So, you know, we were heard, and other representatives, you know, reached out to us and said, like, hey, this is an issue that we want to support. And a lot of different leaders in Philadelphia also, you know, stood against, you know, the underfunded schools, public schools, Black and brown schools in Philadelphia. And in fact, some of them went to Harrisburg, I think a couple of days later, to do some like real civil disobedience. A lot of them got arrested that day. And we're talking like clergy people, council people, representatives. I don't even know if you might know about this representative, but it was a huge thing. And you know, I'm like, really, like, that's just the example of what good trouble looks like, led by youth. We were all youth organizers. And so, yeah, so it's something to read about, actually.
Jaisy, I remember so clearly when that happened. So like it was really a powerful moment of interrupting the news cycle to bring attention to that issue. And I'm just noticing the connections between your answer and some of the things you all have said about the key elements of making good trouble, that you weren't doing it alone. You had found some other people who were passionate about it, your authenticity, and then this connection to what Aaliyah was saying about being willing to lose something, right? That people were really putting something on the line in the actions that they were willing to take. So just seeing some of those connections from the earlier conversation and the example you just gave.
Yeah, and I'll, you know, kind of, in my position, good trouble is a little bit easier to do, just because it can be as simple as, you know, floor speeches and kind of raising heck, given the microphone and the soapbox that I already get to stand on. But in general, I mean, I kind of think of good trouble as and I think I mentioned on the jump board, just kind of pushing past acceptable progress to try and get to, you know, real standing, to try and get to just kind of an acceptable standing, because oftentimes we look at the two, you have to be able to push past what is an acceptable level of, you know, we're making progress here. That's good work. Good trouble is pushing a little bit further than good work. And you know, to me, you just have to be willing to, you know, every now and then say, I'm sorry, but you do so because you know it's the right thing. And it sometimes good progress takes way too long. There are too many good progressive steps along the way that keeps you in positions that are not good standing. And so, you know, I still get to do that all the time. It can be, you know, taking positions, trying to lead on legislation that others have already been thinking about working on, but because I'm ready to lead faster, or at least make more noise about it, you know, we'll step on toes. I'll apologize later, but hopefully we can really, you know, create a spark, right? So in Harrisburg, I'm the young person, and here amongst you guys, I'm kind of the old guy, but that dynamic is still the same. It's over time, you know, folks, the older we get, the more I'll say we understand the nuance that means these are all the various progressive steps that'll get us to some good place. The older we get, we kind of, we become too accepting of current status quo and the little bits of incremental progress we can make on status quo, that you kind of have to bring this younger mindset that says, I don't know and don't care about your status quo. Here's acceptable standing, and we need to get there, because realistically, there oftentimes is no good reason why we're not there already. That's the beauty of young and engaged minds, is you get to see the world a little bit more from a simplistic perspective, but that simplistic perspective oftentimes is really true. It's really correct. It really is where we should get. So you end up stepping on toes, and I get to step on a lot of toes right now in Harrisburg, but good trouble then becomes really easy to find. And I've got, probably way too many examples of it at this point in my first 10 months on the job.
I think for me, good trouble, I subscribe to the Shirley Chisholm motto of, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. So I never asked for permission to be in certain conversations that I felt like were important for me to be there. Like Napoleon just said, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than to have regret that you didn't even get into the conversation. So I definitely subscribe to that. And I think for me, navigating through higher ed, I also knew that I was in a world that was not built for me. Higher ed in America was built for rich white men. I am neither. Well, all three. So at the end of the day, this is a world that is going to be unequal for me from the day I step on campus to the day I graduate and continue as an alum. Is not a structure that's built for me. So I was okay to challenge the status quo of what was acceptable, and ask questions. Why doesn't this exist? For example, why didn't we have a Black Alumni Association here at Arcadia? So they didn't have one. I created one. Why didn't we have a food pantry to address food insecurities on campus? Well, I created that too. Why didn't we have diverse travel opportunities for students that don't want to go to a European-centric trip? Why don't we have these things? So it's just asking the questions of why. If you want to change something, study it. Because in order for me to ask them to switch it, I had to get the numbers in their face. You show them the recruitment numbers. You show them that we're in the 7th largest metropolitan area, but our diversity numbers are abysmal. You show those in the positions of power and you challenge it. If you have an issue with the curriculum, go to the provost. If you have an issue with the student, you go to enrollment management. You understand who the players are and you go start knocking on doors. And one of the things that, with me being a non-traditional student, I did with students to build them up so they can understand the importance they were as a stakeholder. That when you're paying tuition, you're entering a contract. And if your institution is not upholding their part of their contract, hold them accountable for that. You have power as a student that's attending an institution, that if they're not providing the service that you believe, you can then turn and push it onto them and say, well, why not? Why are you not giving this to me? Because you're due that explanation. So good trouble, to me, trouble is when you make somebody uncomfortable because you're troubling their mindset and their spirit and what they believe was true. So when you're sitting here changing the status quo of why does this look like a monolith and it's not diverse, then people have to answer the question. So I think good trouble is you got to start. And like everyone said, you find like-minded people, because it's easier to say no to one than it is to 20 to 50, 100, or how many people you get in numbers. So you find those like-minded people, but you do your research and you understand what the issues that you're trying to fix. Because if you don't know where you're trying to get to, you're just running in circles. And if somebody gives you something, you're going to think that's a lot, but you left a lot on the table. So do your due diligence, do your research. So when you're making your ask, you be specific and you get everything you need at the time that you're asking for what you're asking for.
Such good, such powerful advice. I keep thinking about our working groups, you know, kind of formulating what they want to be asking for and what they're coming up with. And I hope everybody really takes all of that advice to heart. I want to say that the first question that came up in the Q&A was actually the last question that Oliver and I were going to ask you. So I think at this point, I'm going to ask that question, and then Ellen, turn it over to you for the rest of the Q&A. And I think, you know, Good Trouble asks a lot of us, and it takes a toll. And so, you know, the question is, how do you handle your mental health while you're, you know, stirring up good trouble? How do you sustain yourself? Where are the places that you've had to draw a line? What does that look like for you? And any of you that want to chime in on that, I think that's such an important one, especially right now as people have taken on a lot and yeah, might be burning out.
I know for me, I am someone who definitely seeks out help when I need it, especially when it comes to mental health issues. I have been in therapy for years, and that's something that's greatly helped me. And not only, you know, with emotional stuff, but like how to process like everyday situations without internalizing everything. I think especially when we talk about race, especially as like a Black and brown student, it's really easy to kind of carry it all. And they're also like really hard conversations to have. So I think it can kind of stick with you. I also think, like we were talking about so many times, like solidarity is important. Finding like-minded people is important. Having a good support system in place, you know, before things happen, before you have to have these difficult conversations is important, because the support of friends and family, and, you know, other students who share your same beliefs is really important, and they can really uplift you in a way that allows you to be more outspoken. And so, yeah, I think asking for help is the first step, because I know a lot of people kind of skip over that and don't reach out for help, but that's also about having resources, which a lot of people don't have access to. So that, you know, brings up another conversation of, you know, how do we handle mental health, especially in the Black community and stuff like that.
For me, I mean, I could easily go from this question and take everyone to the cross, right? So there's an awful lot for me that is, you know, anchored in my faith that is an answer to this question and most of them. But I think there is significant benefit, obviously, in having kind of that support system that Tessa, you know, talks about, in finding a good therapist that you connect with. There is significant benefit in just appreciating that oftentimes it's not the good trouble that causes you mental anguish, but it's what you're fighting against that oftentimes causes, you know, the anguish. Sometimes you almost sleep better when you feel the sense of agency that good trouble can bring. And then you know, finally, I think that there is just, you know, hopefully you guys will continue to begin to realize that you're meant to be there, right? So, you know, the summary of the faith in all of this is oftentimes you're meant to be somewhere and you're meant to do something. You may not feel it, you may not have realized it, but if you're being called or kind of feel like you can't not get involved, sometimes you can't not get involved. And not getting involved causes more, you know, trouble and anguish mentally than actually stepping out and doing something that just kind of feels natural. So it's a great question, and the answer is oftentimes just go. Take care of yourself. You can't burn out. You have to understand, you know, the age-old principle. If you're on a plane and the airbags come out, you know, make sure that you put yours on first. You absolutely have to devote yourself to self-care, and then you get back to work.
For me, it's three things. First one is music. Music is the foundation of social justice action. Music is an expression of freedom in social justice work. I am a musician, I'm a singer, I'm a songwriter. And so I find peace in music. And it's a way to express myself when I feel like I can't scream anymore, I can't talk anymore. It's a way for me to express myself. Second thing is faith. Regardless of religion, I think faith says a lot about the things that we're fighting against, and the things that we're fighting for, the issues that we deal with. I think for me as a Black woman, I think faith, when we're talking about, Islam talks about how we are all made of different races and different tribes to be brought together to do, the work of the Holy One, however you identify the Holy One as. So I value that. And I come from a background of Christianity, Protestant background. And I've found that those principles and those values that I've learned about through my life have been ways I respond to injustice in the world. Seeking justice and rebuking oppression is like the foundation of like my life. Like that's what I do, and that's the work that I want to do for the world. So I follow that, and that's a biblical phrase. My third thing would be, what Tessa said. I think it's really important for Black and Brown folks to be going to therapy, to be finding ways of counseling, whether it's Black healing. There's Black healers, there's Black therapists, Black psychologists. We're dealing with trauma every day, where our trauma is coming out all the time when we go into the workspace, regardless of the work that you do, and so we need to be able to deal with that trauma. And especially in social justice work, it almost feels like you're exploiting your trauma at times because you're dealing with injustices that you face in your own personal life. So I think, you need, like, professional help is key.
So I guess I'm gonna have the consensus of a good therapist is a must in this work. Burnout is real. So my second thing is learning the power of no. Don't take on everything. You're not a superhero. You think you want to take on it's not your responsibility 100% to change the world. But I think when you're an activist, you go down that very slippery slope and it turns from one issue to another issue to another issue. You think you're going to take everything on. So learning the power of a 2-letter word of no. And then my third thing is leaning on your tribe. Whoever your tribe is, your tribe will build you up when the world knocks you down. Because when you're doing this work, you're going to have the detractors, you're going to have the naysayers, and your feelings will be hurt. People will make you feel like you are lower than low, but your tribe will be there to build you back up and pick up the pieces. So those are my 3 things that help me get through. And I think you don't know what you need until you start. and then you'll start learning your resources that you need. It's like your toolkit, you know. Superman knows that he can't go near kryptonite, so you know what you need to have at hand, because there's no activist rule book, because everybody is an activist in their own different way. So you learn by the power of experience.
Such powerful answers. There's another question in the Q&A that's one that I think has been threaded through in several of the answers already. It's a great question. How do you know when you need to start working outside of the system, right? Or organization, and when is the right time to work with the system or an organization? How do you balance that when you're getting into good trouble? And I think, yeah, so working within the system and making good trouble, or pushing the system from the outside to make good trouble. How do you balance that, and how do you know when it's time to push from the outside or to move to the inside?
I think for me, it's the path of least resistance sometimes. Or if something's not working, you might start on the inside and it might tell you no, but then you have to go outside because you know that you need that yes. So it's fluid and it's organic. You know when you have to work with the system to get somewhere, but then you know when the system is blocking you, you need to circumvent them and go around. So I don't think it's a true answer, you know, because like Napoleon said, when you get that calling and you working towards that goal, you know how to move. Like, you know when to make that left, you know when to make that right, because you know what you're trying to do. Because again, it's authentic. So you know what you're working towards. So if someone's working with you, cool. But once they say no, and you know that you have to get that done, you're willing to go against them and go against the grain to get to that answer, because that's what you know in your heart of hearts you have to get done, because it's been placed upon your heart in that calling that you have to get it done. So I think for everyone it's fluid and it's just instinctual. You'll know when you have to work with them, and then you know when you have to go against the grain.
Other folks have a response to that question?
So I'd say it is fluid. I'll make it a balance of both. Temperament is important, agency. Another is, looking at the game board. So temperament is, some folks just don't like being at the table. There is kind of, a language and a process that exists at the table. Pick a table, there is a language and a process. And even if you get a no at the table, it doesn't mean that you can't then, continue to work it to get your yes. But if you're at the table, oftentimes, when I was at tables, I would tell people, like, I don't need to advocate as much anymore because I'm part of the legislative process. I can do. So I don't need to, yell and shake. I can do, but you have to understand that the way to do it. And some folks don't like that. Temperament can be either disqualifying or it can really say, I may not be as good, in a rally as I am at the board table. I should be at the table and work within the system. Again, another is agency, which kind of goes without saying. You might not yet be in the system. So if you can get there and you can see a path to getting success from within, that can be hugely important. And the final thing that I will add to that is this sense of what's the game board. Oftentimes, real change requires a little bit of both. It requires somebody who's inside the system, making sure that everyone else at the table has their eye on the people outside the system who are raising heck, so that we can then say, and here is why and how we're going to get to this result. Similarly, if you're outside the system and you're just raising all kinds, and you don't identify anyone who's actually at the table, who is there helping to advocate for your issue and your position, you're gonna yell an awful lot at that wall, and that wall may not move. That wall may become even more resolute, right? So there is this wonderful partnership that happens in change, where there's someone on the inside who's counting on someone on the outside and vice versa. So if you're at the table and you've got somebody who's really good and ready to yell, great. If there's no one outside and you feel like you could be outside and there are an awful lot of good folks at the table, just not enough to get the majority, well, then maybe somebody needs to step outside. But that partnership, how that game board moves, is also very important.
Yeah, and I'll add to what Napoleon said. I think there are roles for everyone, like I said before, in and outside of the systems we're trying to work against. So it's Napoleon's responsibility to be at the forefront of advocating for the policies that we need to change, right? But then it could be my responsibility to like be the folks who are like constituents, right? To hold Napoleon accountable, right? We all have different roles that are in and outside of the systems, even if we're working against them. Another thought is staying true to your values when we're in these roles. I think it's really hard to like I said, I really went through a lot trying to figure out what my role is in this justice work, fighting against the systems. And so, I find that when you get into those spaces, when you get into those roles and responsibilities, you're also struggling with trying to adjust to the culture of your space, if that makes sense, like the culture of how things work where you are in that system. And so being reminded of like why you came here, what your responsibilities are, and staying true to that could really support, your whether you're in the like the idea of whether you're in the right space or not. It could really help you get to that space, if that makes sense. I'm just trying to speak on what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think knowing your audience is really important when it comes to any sort of social justice work. You can create, every program under the planet, like the Love Pilot program. But if the people who need to hear the message aren't a part of the conversation, then it might be time to move up and, work outside. I think it's best to start small, but I also think, if your methods of communication and, trying to make change aren't really being met or heard, then I think that would be the biggest indicator that you might need to work outside of the system to directly impact it.
Super. We're getting close to the end of our time, but there's a question that this semester in the Love Pilot, we have many students who are taking different courses, who are also participating in like this experience outside of class of working with people across different classes to think about what kinds of impact they might want to have to address particular issues of racism in particular areas. Like, as we said, Oliver and Tessa are in the sports group. There's a group on criminal injustice. One of the things that keeps coming up in the class that I'm teaching, which is about moving beyond allyship, is just how important it is. Like, we've been talking about working inside the system, working outside of the system, but I think also different people come to these issues with different degrees of access and privilege and benefit from the system or oppression from the system. I just wonder, is there anything that any of you have to say about building possibilities for good trouble that are around coalition building or around people acting as co-conspirators? Is that something that has come up in your work? Because I know it's been a big question coming up as we try to do this work at a predominantly white institution where, we're trying to figure out what are the possibilities for making good trouble in a community where we all have differential access to resources. So I don't know if any of you have anything to say about that. Or any experiences in building coalitions.
I think for me, it still goes back to the whole concept of you have to lose something. And for those that's allies, that want to be allies, it's losing being comfortable and losing that privilege and checking it. I think that people, when you're doing the work and understanding you don't have all the answers, it may be a situation to where you are comfortable. And if you're going into the work, then for once, you may be at the point of being the minority that has to listen versus being the majority that dictates to others. So I think when you're coalition building, everyone loses a little to sit at the table because you're gaining the community, you're gaining the education. Like a lot of times, like Jaisy said, it's the trauma, when you have these conversations over and over. Black and brown people, we know what it is. I know what racism is because I go through it, whether it's overt or it's small, is something that I experience throughout the day, whether it's a microaggression or et cetera. I get it. But if you're someone who doesn't understand what it looks like, then you have to be willing to lose being comfortable when I'm explaining it to you and just listen to me. Where for a lot of people, they're not accustomed to having someone educate them on something that they think that they get all the time. So I think when you're going into those spaces and those coalitions, everyone has to be able to be vulnerable. That's another thing. You have to be vulnerable, and it might manifest different in different people. So coalition building is hard. It's uncomfortable. It's I've sat in on different working groups where sometimes we have to have those hard discussions that people don't want to have, and not feel attacked that if someone is saying this is how I've been treated in this space, it's not a personal attack against all white people. Like a lot of people will take it personal. It's not personal. I'm just sharing where I'm coming from and my vantage point, and being willing to listen, because when you listen, you learn. So I think those are the things that when you're building those coalitions, is key. It's a key component of each of them.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. For me, one thing that I follow is, and I've kind of been saying this over and over, but I'll use a different term, stepping up and stepping back. So what I mean by that is there's a role, again, I said this over and over, there's a role for everyone in the justice world. But there's also an end to the role that you started in, right? And so I think that when we go into these spaces, when we develop in these spaces, we need to make room for others. I really think that it's important to, when we get a seat at the table, we're making room for others to take over our seat, because as we develop in these positions that we take, these responsibilities that we take, we always should be making room for folks who never had a seat to be able to have a seat. So that's something that I really think would be important, especially if we're building, we're we're building a coalition, we're building an effective team to contribute to every aspect of change in our system, or like in our space. We have to be able to allow people to develop in that, to be able, to contribute.
That has to be really intentional, right? So one of the things that I love, kind of beyond allies concept, because there should become a point where if your voice is loud enough, your allies shouldn't, out you, if you, right? So all too often you end up shouting our folks that we're theoretically an ally for. And that's when you check yourself. You step back and you allow the folks that you're trying to provide a voice to use it. And that's a very intentional process. And sometimes those people aren't getting ready to shout as loud as you are. Yes, I can shout louder, but that's not always the goal, right? So you're an ally to a movement, or to a cause, or to a community that needs to just develop their voice. So bring folks who aren't as good at shouting and bring them in and tell everyone to shut up. Right? So instead of having to outshout, just use your privilege, use your position. Say, all right, everybody, stop and be quiet. I'm breaking up again, so I apologize.
Yeah. If I heard what you were saying, I think you were saying something really important, though, is that it's important if you're trying to be an ally or a co-conspirator to check yourself and not just keep trying to yell louder. But sometimes the right role is to step back, even if you can make your voice louder. Am I capturing some of what you were saying? Yeah. Thank you so much. And we're almost at the end. I wonder if there's just sort of one word or a short phrase that you would want to leave the folks who are here tonight with, to inspire them to continue to keep up the good fight and make good trouble. Any final words of wisdom, a word or a phrase that you want to keep people with? Step back and allow those you're fighting for to fight for themselves. Yes. Mm-hmm. The status quo has got to go. Uh-huh. Any of the panelists have a final word?
I would say start small, but always be thinking big. I think we can make the biggest impacts on those who are directly around us and who we see every day. I think it's a lot easier to build relationships. I know this is more than just a small phrase, but build relationships with those around you. Start small, but think big.
Love that.
I'm actually going to steal this from someone else. If you're in the room, speak up and use your voice. If you're there for a reason. So don't ever take for granted being in those spaces. So utilize that to the highest potential.
Excellent. Again, many thanks. I stay tuned for the second act up of the semester that will be happening on the 11th of November. We're going to end with a little inspiration from Bob Marley about getting up and standing up. He doesn't talk about good trouble in particular, but I think it's what he meant. So thank you all for coming.
I think we lost Jaisy for just a minute, and I was wondering if she had her final word out before. Sorry, I saw you go and come back, Jaisy. We're just wondering, did you have any final thoughts to share before we move into Bob Marley?
Can you hear me well? Okay, great. Sorry, my laptop died, but whoever wants more information about organizing and how they can get involved in the social justice world, I'm happy to be a resource. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you all.